Hello, hello. My name is Clark Heron, aka the Harry Hobo, and welcome to AKA Sports episode number 17. And as always, co-hosting it with me, the man, the myth, the legend himself, simply known as Fletch. Fletch, once again, thank you again for helping me host this show for AKA Sports. If you want to listen to us a little bit more, obviously, you can always go to anchor.fm/AKA Sports, or even check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/AKA Sports or FB. So that's AKA Sports FB for Facebook. Fletch, we've had a tremendous weekend of sports. We had a lot to watch this past weekend. Um, any NFL games, maybe some college games, NBA games that you watched this weekend that you found a little bit more interesting than the rest?
Um, Not so much this weekend. This weekend was a really good sports weekend, though. You had a lot going on. We're kind of at that. I think we talked about it a few weeks ago. That almost like sports eclipse, if you will. So there's a lot to digest every weekend, and I guess the biggest thing that I noticed, and we'll get into it when we talk hoops a little bit more, but just how the Warriors are rolling and what they were able to do to the Nets the other night. So, but outside of that, kind of business as usual throughout this whole weekend. What did you find this weekend, man?
There was a lot of college basketball this weekend. I tried to dive into it as much as I could. There's actually some upsets just recently in the past several days that we'll touch on a little bit during the show. But like you mentioned, we have a lot of sports to digest. A lot of our free time's getting sucked up, and that's totally fine. I'm totally fine with just sitting down, relaxing, and watching sport after sport. I have no problems with it this time of year. So let's go ahead and jump into the show here today. We will jump with the news and notes. The first article, we saw it pop up on ESPN. We mentioned it just a little bit off air. It was an article stating that the 2001 Miami Hurricanes football team was arguably and could be ranked the number one best college football team of all time. They were completely loaded with so much talent. Just a few names to mention would be Hall of Famer Ed Reed. You have Bryant McKinnie, Clinton Portis. And again, that's just to name a few because they ended up having 38 NFL draft picks from that team. Just a phenomenal team. I definitely remember watching them because they actually tried to go back to back the following year and couldn't quite get it done. But Fletch, I put up a list from Bleacher Report. They put up their top 10 teams of all time. Two questions for you. Number one, do you also agree with them that the Hurricanes of 2001 are the best team of all time? And number two, can you name me one other on that list if you haven't seen the list?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think they would be number one. That team is very well known. Um, There's a couple teams that I would mention. Actually, the U again in the '80s, back when I believe Michael Irvin was there, was also a pretty loaded team. And then one that we actually got to see would be the Trojans, USC Trojans, when Leinart and Bush were leading the backfield as well. Those are a couple that come to mind in this whole argument, and I guess actually a third team as of more recent. Um, and I guess there's a few that probably included in this debate if you look at either Alabama or LSU. Specifically, I'm referring to the LSU team that recently won with Burrow, Chase, Jefferson, Edwards-Helaire, and a couple other guys. But, their NFL careers have yet to be, seen, in length. We have only year one or two into a few of these guys' careers. So, but those are the ones that come to mind here, man. I don't know how many of those I listed that or named that may be on this list, but I would venture to say at least one or two of these have to be there.
You are absolutely correct. At number five was those 2004 USC Trojans. And then at number six were the 2019 LSU Tigers, at least according to Bleacher Report. Obviously, the biggest problem
Nice.
that I have with these type of lists is number one, I don't remember watching any of these teams, and I wasn't watching most of the teams that I wasn't born during those times. Obviously, like, 72 USC Trojans is number three, the 71 Nebraska Cornhuskers on the list at number two. I didn't watch any of those teams, so I can't accurately compare those teams, and obviously it was a different time for any one of these. But one team I
Mm-hmm.
like that was on this list was the 2005 Texas Longhorns with Vince Young. I remember watching that national championship game, that great Rose Bowl game, running to the corner of the end zone to get the win over USC. Ah, I absolutely love that. And surprisingly enough, the only Alabama team that's ranked is the 79 Crimson Tide at number 9.
Wow,
Yes. So
that
it
is interesting.
yeah, and I'm looking for the honorable mentions and there's no other Alabama team mentioned. And even the honorable mentions, at least according to Bleacher Report. So, interestingly enough, I know there's a lot of older teams on there. They have the 1945 Army Black Knights. I remember that team. Said
Oh
no one.
God.
But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of really good teams on there. Obviously, if you have another name in mind of the greatest team of all time, put it in the notes for us. Maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion on another podcast down the road. But I like where ESPN is. I like where Bleacher Report is. That Miami Hurricanes was just loaded of a team. So can't argue with it
Mm-hmm.
too much. But at the same time, I didn't watch most of these teams play because I wasn't born. But that's neither here nor there. So
Most
that,
weren't.
yeah, exactly. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's stick with college sports, and we'll go to college basketball. There was a few upsets this past week. Just yesterday, we saw the Oregon Ducks get throttled by BYU. Um, and actually, that was a couple nights ago on Tuesday. The same night, Michigan lost by 2 to Seton Hall. They were ranked number 4 in the nation. And then just yesterday, we also had Maryland 20th in the nation lose to George Mason. So it's very early. There's not really any value to these wins. It's not like college basketball, or not like college football, where there's very little games to choose from. They don't have that big of an impact for the most part at this time. But Fletch, you've taken a look at the schedule coming up over this weekend and coming this week. Any big games that you've found?
Yeah, for sure, man. We got a few coming up that I'm kind of excited about. And like you mentioned, I mean, there's little weight to these games. It does kind of help us a little bit with the rankings going into the rest of the season as we get a little bit deeper into non-conference play, a little bit deeper into conference, or it's, once we start conference play, I should say. These games may have an effect on future rankings, future bracket position, things of that nature. But a couple big notable games here coming up. We're recording this on a Thursday night as we usually do, and the folks you'll hear this Friday and Saturday as well. But currently, as we are doing our podcast, we have Ohio State versus Xavier, which just kind of a rivalry. If you're from Ohio, you understand Xavier's, kind of been a very, very good basketball program out of Cincinnati, and then Ohio State, also another very good basketball program. These guys are facing off now. Going into this weekend, we got a couple notable ranked games. Saturday, we have North Carolina at or against Purdue. They're actually playing in a neutral site, and the Cheez-It Hall of Fame tip-off. They're playing in Connecticut. Also included with this is a very good preseason or early season basketball tip off or classic, if you will, after the North Carolina Purdue game, or I shouldn't say after that, but including that game. You also have Villanova and Tennessee, a nice ranked matchup in this tip off classic. Those both of those games are Sunday. A lot of these games will get a new game on Saturday. We get a new game on Sunday, depending on who wins a lot of these classics and tournaments. And then going into the week next week, there's a few other games, but the one I really want to bring up, Clark, is this one. This is number one versus number two early in the season. This is a good measure stick for both Gonzaga and UCLA, ranked 1 and 2 respectively. It's also really nice. It has some tournament vibes to it because it's going to be on a neutral site in Vegas at T-Mobile Arena. It is a late game, being on the West Coast, 10 o'clock on ESPN on Tuesday night. So hopefully that might be a night where we might have to stay up and watch some hoops as long as we can. So I'm excited about that game headed into next week as well. And outside of that, you got a couple other ranked games. UConn versus Auburn is probably to be mentioned as well before we get into next week, or before we get deep into next week. So, very, very exciting start to the season. You mentioned it. We've seen a couple upsets. Expect to see more this early in the season as teams jockey for position. Some teams showing you what they're made of. Some teams showing you, they may not be as good as previously ranked, and we'll get that sorted out soon. I'm assuming. So I'm excited for this upcoming week of college hoops.
Yeah, there's a lot of games coming up, just like you mentioned. This coming Tuesday, Gonzaga versus UCLA. Again, having those tournament vibes. It's really, really nice to see those games, big games early, obviously on nights that don't include NFL
Mhm.
games or college football. So we'll definitely have some time to watch those games, and we'll keep an eye on college basketball as we continue to progress throughout the season. Fletch, I'm just going to let you push straight into the professional form of basketball. Uh, any couple of news that's
Yeah,
out there in the NBA that is catching your eye?
yeah. There's a couple things, and we talked a little bit about these off air. And if folks you've been paying attention, a couple notable things out off the court. First and foremost, the Staples Center is now going to be called Crypto.com Arena. Excited about this, honestly. If I mean, me and you may not remember, or at least saw many games played, because they moved that when we were kids. The Great Western Forum was always the staple in Los Angeles. A lot of events held there. All the Laker games were held there. I think Clipper games as well. They moved into the Staples Center. They saw big events hosted here, and the ticket on this was massive. $700 million is what Crypto.com paid. $700 million. That is a lot of zeros, Clark.
Yeah, it's over 20 years, but that still averages out to I think it's 35 million a year just to have your name on
Yes,
the arena.
yes, indeed. And we have about a month until that is unveiled. That is actually going to be unveiled, or the new logos arena will debut December 25th, Christmas Day, when the Lakers host the Nets at home. Um, and then by the summer here in June, actually, which I'm assuming probably after the finals are over, regardless of who's in it, is probably when you'll see the name change over to officially across the board to Crypto.com Arena. So change is always, different, but yet in this case, I'm not opposed to it because the building is still the same. I'm sure you'll get the same vibes of how Staples Center likes to dim the light over the crowd, and the light is a little bit increased on the court, which makes it look more like a stage, perfect for Hollywood, of course. So I'm assuming we'll probably see a lot of that, and then also too, we all know the Clippers are moving soon to their own building, so it will be the Lakers and the Lakers home only very soon. So moving forward, though, we'll kind of monitor this a little bit and see how things go. That's one big piece of news. The other is, again, something we talked about as well, and it's something that's popped up as of recent, is that the general managers of the NBA are forming an association. Clark, you kind of actually put me on game to this yourself here. Could you fill the folks in a little bit more about this situation, or about this group forming?
Yeah, it was the NBA general managers are working to finalize a formation, a very similar group to what we see with the National Basketball Coaches Association in college basketball. Their GMs are pretty much trying to put together a group because what's going on with the Portland Trailblazers internal probe? It was a situation where there was a lot of complaints being sent from HR. The Blazers went out and hired a law firm, I believe it was Melvany and Myers. Probably butchered that name, but it's fine. They hired that law firm to conduct a fair and independent review of the situation. And when they saw this happening, the GMs kind of looked at it and said, wait a minute, we're kind of under the same probe as any coach or really any other player at this point. They were concerned that they could potentially be fired for quote unquote traditional reasons based on team performance, personality conflicts, as well as differing philosophies, which we talked a little bit off air. The first one, team performance, that's really on them. I'm not sure why they would be afraid to not do their job as GMs. Obviously, putting together that's their job, but yes, or being fired for personality conflicts or differing of philosophies, that's what they're concerned about. So they're going to put this group together. They've already alerted all the owners in the association at this point to basically give themselves a little bit of a buffer just to protect themselves. It's nothing overly crazy that I can think of. It's not like we've seen anything crazy with the National Basketball Coaches Association, but it definitely protects them. It's not quite a unionization situation, but it definitely gives them a level of protection against, like I said, other things that really they're not responsible for, but could be fired because of. So again, one of those things to keep an eye on. It's very interesting if you're looking outside of just the sport and look at the business side of things. It's definitely something that, honestly, I'm kind of surprised that didn't exist to begin with. Uh,
Right.
so this is what they've been doing now is trying to put this together based on the probe that the Trailblazers have done internally to kind of protect themselves moving forward. Uh, but again, very interesting outside the sport. Anything else within the NBA worth mentioning?
I guess just really quick, we'll kind of just hop into a few on court news and notes. I appreciate you filling us in on that. On the general managers forming this, some type of group here. Just to kind of, touch on that a little bit. I think I do believe that probably something like this probably I would say should have existed. It's good that it is forming. I think I'm not a big fan of like turnover between coaches and GMs, really in professional sports in general. I understand, what have you done for me lately is always going to be the thing in pro sports, especially with basketball and football and baseball. Everybody's trying to kind of win now, and the teams that aren't, I believe what happens, and we saw this, and I used the Cleveland Browns as a good example in sports. We saw how bad they were for years and years and years. Well, if you go back quarterback football, there's a lot of turnover that happened in Cleveland. It caused a lot of that to, it basically caused them not to succeed. I think there's something very important about consistency, and I think you have to kind of let things grow organically a little bit. And when you sign people to contracts, they want the players to abide by these contracts. Yet, when it comes to coaches and GMs, they were very quick to fire them before those contracts expire, based on performance of, say, just 1 or 2 years, a la Stan Van Gundy in New Orleans last year, being one example. For the Pelicans, I know it wasn't a great coaching job, and I think they're trying to make sure that they can keep Zion Williamson, and that's part of the reason why they made the switch. But nonetheless, doing 1 year for that team is, and then switching is obviously not working, as they were bad last year, and they look even worse this year. I know Zion hasn't played, but before he got there, before Zion got there, that team was at least respectable and have a lot of the same key pieces. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there, and kind of a smooth transition for us, Clark, as we head into some actual on-court NBA news. I don't know if you got to catch the game the other night, but it was kind of a anticipated matchup early in the season, which was the Nets versus the Warriors, and they played in Brooklyn. Um, the game was actually pretty intriguing. I mean, the Warriors handled business, and it kind of exposed the Nets for who they are. Without Kyrie Irving, they showed that they need more help. I don't know if maybe Kyrie is the missing piece there, or if these role players are just not quite as good as what we maybe have expected, or maybe what they expected. But Golden State's playing lights out this year. Clearly the best team in basketball right now. And Clark, we have great news. Klay Thompson is being cleared for 5-on-5. So expect him to return very soon. I was assuming Christmas would be the target date on that. I'm thinking that it still will be, as they just want to make sure that he's 100% before he comes back on the floor. Also, too, with the way they've been playing, maybe not want to interrupt the flow quite yet. And I think it would be a seamless transition once Clay returns. So I'm excited about that. Um, Outside of that, the surprise team, the Washington Wizards, are still number one in the East somehow. So that's something very exciting, to be honest with you. It's good to see parity in NBA, and that shows that what Russell Westbrook trade has so far paid off for them. And look at the Lakers, possibly not so much. So here we are, about 15 games into the season for give or take, obviously, for quite a few teams, and starting to see, like we mentioned last week, you're really starting to see who's good, who's struggling, who, we're waiting to see what these certain teams look like. But a lot of teams are looking really good, and I'm excited going into the season. And the East is actually looking very deep and very strong, which is very good for the league, as they've kind of been almost a lesser conference for the better part of the last 2 decades. But as of late, last few years, especially this year, they're really showing, you know, that their time is now. And I'm liking what I'm seeing. So it's good. Again, great time of year as everything's kind of overlapping each other. But that's kind of the early season hoop news so far.
Yeah, and we'll continue, much like college basketball, allow this season to kind of progress to kind of see where things go. But like you mentioned, Klay Thompson coming back. The league already doesn't like the Warriors for being so good. Uh, I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, only good things moving forward, assuming he comes back fully healthy and what we remember him being. Before
Hmm.
we jump into the MLB, because there's quite a bit of news there, any big fights this weekend?
Actually, there is. This is kind of a somewhat of a super fight, and those are the ones we really like to mention. There's always a lot of fights. There's fights every weekend, but there's always a few that stand out. So far this year, Clark, if you remember, I know on the UFC front, we had Usman taking down Covington recently. We had the great heavyweight bout ending the trilogy, as far as we know, between Fury and Wilder. Had a Canelo fight against Caleb Plant. He unified all four of the championships there in the middleweight division. And it brings us to this weekend, sir. So what we have is the most competitive division in boxing right now, and I would say really in fighting in general. The welterweight division, 145, 147 weight class. You have the guys like Errol Spence, who's a title holder. You have Manny Pacquiao, who seems to be possibly retired at this point. He may get one or two more fights, to kind of send him off on his way. But you have Ugas, who beat him, who's also a champion in that division as well, the welterweight division. And here this weekend we have Terence Bud Crawford versus Sean Porter, who is a former champion, and Crawford's a current champion. So big matchup here. Crawford is still undefeated with 37 wins to his name. And then Porter has 3 losses, all of which are all title fights and all respectable losses. And I'm very, very excited to see this fight for a few reasons. Terence Crawford, honestly, and this may be due to I would say subpar management. I'm not going to be too hard on his promoter, but at the same time, he really hasn't fought, to me at least, and I know other people feel this way as well. He really hasn't fought as high level as competition as your Pacquiao's, your Keith Thurmans, your Sean Porters, Danny Garcias, Errol Spences of this division. Just naming, 5, and then of course Ugas being maybe a 6th person I can name in this division now that he's a title holder. These guys have all had fights against each other to a degree. All of them haven't fought each other, but all of them, except Terence Crawford, have had some kind of bout either scheduled or actually happened over the last 2 to 3, maybe even 5 years. Actually, it was to go back a little bit further, as these guys have kind of been at the top for a little while now. So this is Terence Crawford's biggest test to date. Sean Porter is very seasoned. I'm honestly pulling for Sean Porter in this fight. I just don't have a lot of faith in Terence Crawford just due to the competition he has not faced yet. And I think this is going to be his biggest test. And Sean Porter's a bully in the ring, man. So for everybody wanting to tune into this fight, you can catch it on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. I want to say it's $69.99, kind of typical price for a boxing fight. It's this weekend. Should be a good brawl. Again, I'm putting my money right now on Sean Porter. That's how I'm feeling. I do think we'll see a good fight. I'm not expecting any knockouts. I think it'll go the distance, and we may see, a split decision, unanimous decision, one of the two, obviously. But I think that's what it's going to come down to, some type of decision. So keep an eye on this. Personally, I'm pulling for Sean Porter, but I'll be honest, Clark. The best thing for boxing would be for Terence Crawford to win, to possibly set up a super fight between Crawford and Spence, or Crawford and Keith Thurman, or Ugas. There's 3 guys to pick from. Uh, Crawford, if he can win this fight, Spence would be my dream matchup right now. I would love to see these two get it on. And then second on that list for me would probably be Keith Thurman, just for the simple fact that we haven't seen him in the ring, I think, since he's lost to Pacquiao back in 2018, I believe, late 2018. So it's been a close to 3 years, or about 3 years, since he's been in the ring. We've seen him, so I'm curious to see what he looks like as he's kind of getting up there in age. But I'm really excited about this fight, man. I urge everyone to tune into this one to be after your college football game, so you won't miss anything on Saturday. But I'm excited about it, and that is the highlight right now. Probably the biggest fight for the rest of this year. The fights are going to start coming in through January, February, as we see some more get scheduled. But nonetheless, that's what we got this weekend, man, on the fight scene. Um, Again, excited and hope everybody tunes into this one, and we'll recap this next week.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely will recap it, and yet another piece of my free time gone away to another sporting event. Um, but always good to see that the boxing arena and just fights in general is has a lot to talk about, which is always a good thing. Let us go ahead and finish off the
Mm-hmm.
news and notes for the MLB. Now, I'll start with the good news. The good news is the MLB has finished off their awards. Um, we just recently, within the last 5 minutes, finally got the American League MVP. It was a unanimous decision for Shohei Ohtani. Obviously, he's the only reason to get the NL, or the only person to choose for the AL MVP. He let's just look at his line. He hit 257. He hit 46 home runs, 100 RBI, scored 103 runs on 26 stolen bases, and that's just his plate appearances. When he was on the mound, he was 9-2 with a 3.18 ERA, with 156 Ks over 130 and a third innings. Let's just say he was good this year, something that we haven't seen in quite some time, probably since the Babe was around. So congratulations to Shohei Ohtani for a unanimous decision. The NL MVP was just released before that. It was Bryce Harper winning his second NL MVP. Congratulations to him on a phenomenal season. 35 home runs, only 84 RBI, but when you hit 309, you're going to do some things, leading also MLB with 179 OPS plus. Always good to see. Some other notable awards: the American League and National League Cy Young Award winners were both Diamondbacks at one point in their career. Robbie Ray with the Blue Jays won it for the AL, whereas Corbin Burns won the NL Cy Young with the Brewers this year. Congratulations to them. As for Rookie of the Years, we have Randy Arozarena from the Rays, who honestly played last year, but based on the fact he didn't play enough games to actually qualify for his rookie season, uh, yeah, it's weird. Baseball's weird by that, but congratulations. He got a nice little startup, but still got the Rookie of the Year this year. Congratulations to him. And then actual Rookie Year, Jonathan India for the Reds. I believe it was their second baseman this year. He had a phenomenal season for the Reds. Um, Congratulations to him. Kevin Cash, the manager for the Rays, joins Bobby Cox as the only repeating manager of the year. He won it for the AL, whereas the Giants manager Gabe Kapler won it for the NL as well. And honestly, there's only three awards that actually truly matter, and no disrespect to anybody else, but these three awards here actually mean something. That is the Hank Aaron Awards for the AL and the NL. The AL went to Vlad Guerrero Jr., and for the National League, it was Bryce Harper. And then, really, the most important one, the most valuable one, is the Roberto Clemente Award, and that went to the Twins' Nelson Cruz. Congratulations to all three of them and everybody else that won awards this season. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is December 1st is D-Day for the MLB. It is the end of the collective bargaining agreement. Basically, if you don't know what the CBA is, and that's what the collective bargaining agreement is, it's a agreement between the owners as well as the Players Association that basically detail out all the agreements that they're going to play under for the following season or seasons, depending on how long the CBA is. Uh, this one actually runs out on December 1st, which is coming up very quickly. The problem is there's a lot to talk about. The players want a better minimal salary, especially for younger players that are struggling. There's also many other topics as well that they're going to be struggling with. More than likely at this point, based on an article from Jeff Passan on ESPN, basically stating that Commissioner Rob Manfred could potentially lock the players out of the MLB. And basically, what that means is they will not be able to go on any of the MLB premises until an agreement is made. Uh, Completely different from what we saw in 1994 when the players actually went on strike and we lost half the season and didn't have a World Series that year. Uh, so it
Hmm.
seems like the owners are going to put the lockout on the players to try and quicken the talks, potentially get a CBA done. But from what we saw in 2020, when they couldn't decide on how to handle COVID and how to pay players and how many games to play, it doesn't seem like this is going to be something quick. So we'll keep an eye on it as it continues. Hopefully, it does not actually affect the next season, but honestly, it might. And that is a real bummer for the fans. So we will see what happens there. Just a few talking points from their last owners meeting. We talked a little bit about it off air. First, the Rays continue their proposal to try and play in two different home cities, one in Tampa Bay and one in Montreal. Obviously, they know that they're struggling to get ticket sales in Tampa Bay, so they want to try and litigate that a little bit by having a home city in Montreal, something that the owners still have yet to decide on because, granted, with COVID still happening, it's going to be very difficult that if they get to Montreal, they may not be able to leave, assuming that they can even get out of the country at that time. So that will be one thing. The A's could potentially move to Las Vegas. They're still trying to fight their way to stay in Oakland, but we'll see how that plays out. But the more interesting one, and maybe what we could have led this podcast off with, was obviously this past year we had a big issue with pitchers in the MLB using some kind of sticky foreign substance to try and affect the baseball to get a little bit more of a spin rate to it. Obviously, we saw what happened. It got to the point where we had to after each inning, have the home plate umpire check the pitcher's hat and glove after every single inning, something that doesn't seem like MLB wants right now because they want to actually speed up the game, and that seems like it's going to slow it down. But Commissioner Rob Manfred, actually proposed using a pre-tacked baseball. Fletch,
Hmm.
I could be wrong. What are we doing here?
Yeah, that's a bit much. I don't. I mean, I get. I guess I get the reasoning behind it to a degree. But yeah, I'm not a fan of that. That's just not a good idea to me. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We have an issue recently with the balls being very tight. Wasn't that an issue a few years ago?
There's been several issues depending on who you ask. If you ask the hitters, they are being uh, too soft to where they couldn't hit him as far, and then the pitchers were complaining that the rubber on the inside was too tight because they were hitting him too far and too hard. Um, it's difficult. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with the baseballs. I would have to imagine somewhere along the line these baseballs are getting, I wouldn't say doctored is the right word, but changed depending on what MLB wants. If they want more runs scored, maybe they change how the baseballs are made just a little bit. But I'm unsure at this point because the managers or the owners at this point were trying to speed up baseball as well as score a bunch more runs. But if we're going to pre-tack the baseballs, I don't think you're getting a faster game, nor am I going to score more runs with a pre-tack baseball. Um,
True.
and I'm unsure what happens when the pre-tacked baseball hits dirt. Does it collect the dirt? Do we get a heavier baseball? Does it, are we playing with like backyard baseballs where they're wet and they're heavy? We can go do that. I'm fine. I don't think players will like that very much, but uh, at this point, all of these other news really is kind of irrelevant at this point because we still have to wait for the collective bargaining agreement to be figured out. I don't think any of these type of news is really big at this point, but we will definitely keep an eye on it moving forward because uh, what happens with that collective bargaining agreement is going to be huge depending on what gets agreed upon as well as how many years of potential peace we could have between the players union and the owners that just really don't like each other at this point. So we will keep an eye on that. Let's go ahead and jump into the college football playoff rankings. Obviously, if you listened or watched to my prediction show on Monday, you would have seen on Tuesday that I got all 10 correct for the first time in a while. So I'm very, very pleased to get all 10 right. I'm glad that the committee did not put Michigan State above Michigan. Uh, they honestly, like we talked about last time, it wasn't because Michigan's the better team. It's simply because their flexibility and their rankings, it wasn't there. They had to do it.
Right.
That was the only reason for it. So they've dug themselves a hole by saying Michigan was the better team. So now it has to be, it could be a little bit of a slippery slope because, as we mentioned last week, there's a lot of people out there potentially wanting Ohio State put above Oregon, which I don't agree with. But if they're going to go off the logic that they created for the Michigan State scenario, I can see the path, depending on what
Right.
Oregon does versus continuation of what Ohio State does. But we actually talked about off air your rankings. You had all nine, first nine correct, but you had a different number 10. Who was your number 10, and what kind of reasons did you have for having them at number 10?
Yes, sir. My number 10 was actually Baylor this past week or this week. They are number 11th and Wake Forest is 10th, which I'm okay with it, but I still disagree. I get it because Wake Forest has one loss and Baylor has two. The argument that I have is I just don't believe that Wake Forest is that good of a football team. I think they play in the worst Power Five conference in the country right now. I mean, if you just look at their schedule, I mean, they really haven't beat anyone up until just beating NC State, which we really don't know how good they are. And the reason why they're highly ranked in my or were ranked in my opinion is again due to how bad the conference was and they beat formerly ranked opponents. So I just don't put a lot of weight on them, especially knowing how porous and how bad they are on defense. I mean, they have multiple games where they've given up more than 30 points. They gave up 34 to Louisville, 37 to Syracuse, 56 to Army, 58 to North Carolina, and then this past weekend they gave up 42 to North Carolina State. Yes, the purpose is to win the game. However, we know how these rankings play out. And you're basically going with the eye test, you're going with strength of schedule, you're going with, whatever factors it is the committee or and those committee members decide to go with to weight their arguments. I'm assuming this probably was a little bit back and forth between the committee. Baylor gets the nod from me because of essentially they have wins against a ranked BYU team, and they went in and thrashed a ranked undefeated Oklahoma team. Um, that's really my argument, and beat both of those teams by two scores. BYU by 14 and Oklahoma by 13. So nonetheless, I mean, oh, and then I take that back, and they also beat at the time a ranked Iowa State team. I just think their wins are much better than Wake Forest's wins. What's hurting Baylor, I think, in this was that loss to TCU 30-28 a couple weeks back. So I guess I get it in that regard, but you look at it like that, they both lost to unranked opponents while BYU has more wins. I believe if they face off, I just think Baylor would beat them as well. So that's my argument for Baylor being number two. I understand they have two losses, but nonetheless, their wins to me are much better than those of Wake Forest, and that's the reason why I decided to put them 10th. We'll see how it pans out over the next few weeks, though.
Yeah, we still got several games to go, just a couple more in the regular season. I totally agree with you. Their wins are definitely better. Unfortunately, what's hurting them, obviously, like you mentioned, the TCU game. And honestly, I think even though they beat Oklahoma this past week, the committee never really looked highly on Oklahoma. They put them at eighth and just kept them at arm's length. So maybe that's part of into it, but much like you said, we don't know what variables they're using on a week to week basis. If it's the same, if it changes, we don't know. Obviously, I think I'm on the side of where it changes every single week because of what we saw with the Michigan State rankings and how that planned out. Uh, so we'll see, but I can understand putting the one loss team out there, but yes, just like you mentioned, they've given up 100 points over the past 2 weeks combined, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
insane. So, yeah, their defense is very, very bad. So, I'm sure they're sitting on a very thin line as of right now. And Baylor getting that nice win if Wake Forest decides to have a little bit of another game where they give up a bunch of points and potentially lose or just get real close. It wouldn't shock me if they decided to flip these two after that type of week. Uh, but we've got some big games coming up this week that will definitely
Oh yeah.
kind of alter how these playoff predictions look. Obviously, the big one at noon, Michigan State going to Columbus to face number 4 Ohio State. So we will see a big game in Columbus in the Big Ten, which will clearly it will push one of these Big Ten teams probably either to the back end of the top 10 or completely out, depending on how the game goes, which could open up the door for a team like Cincinnati to be number 4, or could potentially open up the idea of having Michigan State finally ahead of Michigan, a team to beat. But I'm not salty about that, but just something. Another ranked game that we're looking at is number 21 Arkansas at Alabama. Uh, I don't think Alabama's going to have any issues here. Do you, Fletch?
No, I don't. I think they'll handle it very well. Actually, they've been playing better as of late. I do actually want to tune into this game. I think it'd be close starting off, but something tells me Alabama's just going to pull away slowly but surely. I don't know if they cover the spread. Right now, it's 20.5 points. Basically, thinking to win by 3 touchdowns. I think that I like that as the line though. It seems right. So I'm actually looking forward to the game because I do think it'd be a good game, at least to start, and it could be, overall pretty solid. But I'm not expecting any upsets there.
Yeah, and hopefully as they can put up a little bit better of a fight than they did against Georgia earlier this season, it should be technically
Yeah.
a win in that sense. The last ranked game that I see on the roster, we've got number 3 Oregon at number 23 Utah. Uh, I, this is going to be an interesting game because we might see a rematch a little bit later on in the Pac-12 championship game. And if Oregon or anybody in the Pac-12 actually wants to make the playoffs, Oregon has to win out because a two-loss Pac-12 team, I don't believe, even if they have a championship, I don't believe they're going to make it in. But we've seen
Agreed.
crazier things happen along the way. I will mention one last thing with the rankings. I'll go back to them real quick. Is that I actually don't have to. I remember it. I'm very pleased that Houston is now ranked. They'll play Memphis on Friday. That's helping Cincinnati quite a bit, especially with SMU. They're playing SMU this week. Very interesting game. Could potentially be one of those you never know, like a potential upset type of scenario because SMU 8-2, they're playing some good football. But if Cincinnati gets by SMU, if they win their final game and they get to the championship game in the AAC, they will most likely face a Houston team that, if they continue to win, it will be a ranked matchup that will give Cincinnati another ranked win to potentially get into the top 4. But we'll see how it plays out. Fletch, any other game on the schedule that you're looking at a potential upset?
Well, actually, I'm going to mention two games that you brought up that I am going to put two teams on upset alert. The first team I'm going to go ahead and put on upset alert is Cincinnati. Actually, I do think that SMU team is a good team. I've seen them play a few times this year. That quarterback Tanner was that Tanner Mordecai is 37 touchdowns this year. Quite a bit for as many games as they played, 10 touchdowns. That's basically throwing near 4 touchdowns a game. So that's something to see, especially against that vaunted defense that is over there at Cincinnati. So I do have Cincinnati on upset alert. I do still pick them to win, but I think they don't actually cover the spread. It may not help them in the future as well if this is a close game because they're not concerned with style points, but the committee seems to be. So I love what Ohio State, for instance, did against Purdue. That was a style point victory, winning by essentially 30 or so, or I think it was just under 30. So this one's one I have on upset alert. I'm not expecting UC to come out and just stump them. I do expect Cincinnati to still win, but I'm not going to be surprised if they lose in this game. And then Clark, the other game that I do have on upset alert, and it will shake things up as well if it happens. And I'm actually going to pick the upset.
Oh,
I'm picking Utah at home Saturday night, ABC, 7:30. I am going to go with Utah. They're actually favored in this game, ironically enough. Not sure how. I would not favor them necessarily, but I am going to go with the Utah winning this game, which is going to shake a lot of things up here. So those are the two that I would put on upset alert. There's one more game I want to mention, not an upset alert game, but before we get there, Clark, are you seeing the upsets, or are you agreeing with me possibly on the two teams that I have on upset alert? And how do you feel about Utah and Oregon?
I like the first one. I'm not 100% sure about the Utah over Oregon. I like the pick because it's at Oregon at 7:30 on ABC. It's a very prime time game, so it could be a very interesting out or interesting game at the end of the day, especially like you mentioned, if Oregon does get beat, it's going to shake up the top 10 quite a bit. There was one other game that I was going to mention, and I for some reason I always mention it because whenever it's played at this stadium, I just I just feel like there could be some magic happening, and that's going to be Baylor going on the road against Kansas State and Bill Snyder Family Stadium. Kansas State, I mean Baylor just won, great game, at home, a lot of energy. Uh, could be one of those little bit too much energy used, can't afford it. Now they go on the road and they kind of get caught a little bit. Kind of it
That's
gets that
true.
feeling to me. Now, I tried that last time with I believe it was Oklahoma against Kansas State and it didn't quite work out. It was close. They should have won that game. But I Baylor is a much better team than Oklahoma, but like I mentioned, whenever you're coming off a huge game, much like we saw with I think it was Michigan State beating Michigan, then going on the road to Purdue and losing to them.
Yeah.
You kind of have that vibe, and usually, more often than not, usually those don't pan out very well for the team that just got a big victory. So we'll keep an eye on that one as well, especially for a team like Baylor that's trying to vie for a Big 12 championship. What was the other game that you wanted to mention?
So the other game I want to mention, this is for my guys at home that like to bet, is Ole Miss versus Vanderbilt. The game is in Mississippi. I just want to mention this line. Mississippi is favored to. I get it. Trust me, I get it. Vandy's bad. Ole Miss is good. Quarterback is good. I I'm curious to see how this pans out. I asked a guy today who follows college football very closely. He gave me the score. Check this out, Clark. 50-7 is what he's expecting to happen. Something along those lines. I'm not opposed to it. I just, if you're a betting man and or woman, that's something that you might want to throw your money on, over or under. It's a very interesting one. If you're going over or under the line, the over under on the game is 64 and a half, by the way. So I mean, we're essentially expecting Ole Miss. The Vegas is at least expecting them to drop about 50 as well, I would assume, based on the over under and based on the line. So I just found that very interesting. That I always find those big lines very interesting. We saw it with Georgia and Missouri actually. More recently, I think it was they were a 39-point favorite in that game, ended up winning by I think 36 or at home. So yeah, man, just interesting. That's on SEC Network 7:30 night game. So I'm sure those guys will be pumped to play, and I'm expecting Ole Miss to slaughter them, and I'm curious to see if they're going to cover the spread or not.
Yeah, I would imagine so as well. We know what kind of program Vanderbilt is, but again, for betting purposes, it's going to be very interesting to see if they can cover the spread. Um, I believe that will wrap up college football. Let's go ahead and move on to the NFL and our pick six from last week. Fletch, you got half of them right. Congratulations. Very well done. I did just a little bit better. I got five out of the six. I only missed the Dallas game, the one game that gets blown out, of course. Uh, Atlanta didn't even have a chance or a prayer in that game. They even turned it off halfway through. So uh,
It's pretty bad.
It was very bad, but I will take the 5 out of 6 for this past week. It gives me a 5 point edge at this time, but new week comes a new chance to catch back up, and a new week for me to fall off the cliff because I don't do very well towards the end of the season when it comes to pick'em, but I will give it my college try. The very first game you have listed for us, you have the Colts versus the Bills. Uh, I saw the over under for this. It said 50 and a
Hmm.
half.
Hmm.
I'm confused by that because both of these teams have very good defenses, but both are
Hmm.
Bills are much better offensively than the Colts. This game being in Buffalo, I've got to go with Buffalo as my choice. I can't really go against them. They've been playing some great football. Who is your choice for this week?
Yes, sir. I think it's gonna be a good game. I think the Colts are a little bit better than their record at 5-5. They've lost a couple nail biters, and they're playing very good football. Jonathan Taylor's leading the league, well, tied for the league in rushing with Derrick Henry still. Which is amazing in itself. What is also amazing, really, with Jonathan Taylor, I just want to mention this: Derrick Henry has like well over 200 carries, where Jonathan Taylor has the same amount of yards on just 161 carries. So I shout out to him for really, really like showing how good he is. He is. I think if you list the running backs 1 through 10 right now, not taking injury into account, we'll say if CMC is fully healthy and, Derrick Henry's fully healthy and a couple other guys, I think you can still safely rank Jonathan Taylor in the top 10, possibly top five at this point, just the way he's been performing, especially this season, and also looking at what he did last year. I do think this is a close game. I do agree with you that the over under is very high. I'm actually going to bet money on this one that the over under that they're not going to exceed 50. Hope I make some money this weekend. um, but nonetheless, it's going to be rainy in Buffalo as well as what the forecast is showing me, under 50 degrees. I think that's great weather for the Buffalo Bills. I think they do pull this off and win a good game. And yeah, I think they handle business. I like Buffalo as well as you do in this one.
Yeah, again, that over under shocked me because of how good these defenses have been played. But let's go ahead and move on to game number two. You have the Packers versus the Vikings. Vikings kind of been playing a little bit better. The Packers got a nice win, but Aaron Rodgers dealing with a little bit of a toe injury and dealing still with the side effects of having COVID here recently as well. This game being inside of a dome kind of leads towards a big day for uh, Green Bay is who I have winning this game. I think him and Adams combination is just going to light Minnesota up. Uh, Fletch, who's your choice?
This is a tough one for me. I'll be honest. There will be no Aaron Jones in this game, I believe. It's sprained MCL from last week, so you're losing your leading rusher. AJ Dillon is very capable though, so I'm not going to knock the running game there in Green Bay whatsoever. The secondary is very good. One thing about Green Bay, they've been playing very good defense this year. The offense is actually what's been struggling this year. Um, Fun fact I saw earlier against Minnesota, I think Aaron Rodgers' touchdown to interception ratio is 50-7, which is remarkable. um,
Decent.
I Yeah, for sure. Kirk Cousins actually plays better on the road. But even though I'm kind of, those points support the Packers, I'm going with the upset this week. I'm going with the Vikings at home. Something about injuries with Rodgers dealing with the toe, fresh off of, kind of, I know he's a week back now, and it's the second game back since COVID. But something about this game just tells me the Vikings may actually pull this off. I think still to this point they have not lost a game by more than one score. Even if they lose, I expect them to only lose by probably one score. I just got a feeling with the injuries that the Green Bay's dealing with, the offensive struggles that they've been having. I think the Vikings pull this off, and I think Kirk Cousins has a pretty good game here against the Packers. So I'm going to go with the Vikings on this one, man.
Not too bad of a pick, and I'm hoping Dalvin Cook has a great day for my fantasy team, but that's neither here nor there. Moving on to this game, a little surprised it was on the roster, but I dig the pick for this game. It is the Dolphins versus the Jets. It was going to be a potentially a good game if Mike the Great White Shark was going to be the starting quarterback for the Jets, but unfortunately they have decided to go with Joe Flacco, a name that many of you may not remember because the last time he was relevant was back in 2012. But he will be the starting quarterback this weekend to face that vaunted Dolphins blitz ticket. Just to let you know, if you're still wanting a ticket, it's as low as $23 if you want to go to East Rutherford Stadium. You can afford it. I know you can. But who do you have in this
Yeah,
game?
yeah. I'll be honest, man. If I was a fan of both of these teams, or either one of these teams, or even if I was just in New York, I actually might go to this game. Just or New Jersey, I really should say. I honestly may go to this game. I mean, honestly, can't really beat a cheap football game. It's still a football game. Nonetheless, I got the Dolphins in this one as well. I believe Tua will play this weekend. Um, I just don't see the Jets beating the Dolphins. I'm not saying the Dolphins are a good team, but at the same time, they're a better team than the Jets, in my opinion.
Agreed. And let's go ahead and move on to game number 4. We have the Bengals on the road to face the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders coming off of an abysmal offensive showing against the Chiefs, who lit them a new one in Kansas City. It was 17-14 at one point, and then they lost 41-14. So that's how bad things got this past week. And Cincinnati coming off of a bye this past week, they should be nice and well rested coming into this game. I would, man, I got to go with the Bengals on this one. I don't love the pick. I think the Raiders could potentially come off of that loss, devastating loss to Kansas City, and really play well. But for now, I'm going to pick the Bengals to win on the road out in Vegas. Fletch, who do you got?
I'm torn on this one, to be honest with you. This was a tough game for me to pick. I am going to go with the Bengals as well. I think they just go in and get the job done. I do think this is going to be a really good game. It's a perfect time for them to match off to or to face off here this season. Just kind of seeing where they're falling in the standings. I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, um, getting pulled up here myself just so I can double check. I think both teams are 5-5, if I'm not mistaken, or no, 5 wins for both teams. Bengals are 5-4, Raiders 5-4. So um, this has some playoff implications for sure. I got the Bengals. I just think they end up pulling it off, getting the job done. I trust that offense a little bit more with Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, obviously at quarterback. A little bit more than I'm trusting the Raiders, who I don't think they've lost. They've won a game, or correct me if I'm wrong. Really, since the Henry Ruggs incident, I mean, I think they maybe won that first week and lost the next two. Um, yeah, I got the Bengals winning this. I just don't trust the Raiders right now. Um, and I think that actually helps they're right now currently eighth and ninth in the AFC playoff race. With If they win, they very well could slide into the playoff spot, depending on what happens on with teams 1 through 7 right now. So a really big matchup. Playoff implications. We're more than halfway through the season at this point. Thus the reason why I picked this game. Just it's has a lot of weight to it. So, but I do have the Bengals winning this one.
Very nice, yes. And we are getting much closer and closer to the actual playoffs. So a lot of these games are having some merit, especially for a team like Kansas City, who went from the basement of the AFC West to now leading the AFC West on a 3-game winning streak, while the rest of the
Mhm.
AFC West is on currently losing streaks. But let's go ahead and talk about the A or NFC West. We have the Cardinals versus the Seahawks. The Seahawks are still trying to get healthy. Russell Wilson, it was the first time in his career that they got shut out in a game this past week in Green Bay. Maybe came back a little bit too early from that finger injury, but maybe another week will give him a chance to heal up a little bit more, facing it off against the Cardinals, who continue to try and get healthy themselves. Hopkins doesn't seem like he's going to play this week. They talked about Kyler Murray potentially coming back this week, but with the bye week the following week and week 12, there's a good chance that neither will play yet again. But with that defense, as well as James Conner leading the NFL with rushing touchdowns with 11, yeah, 11 at this point, um, we will see what happens. This one's tough. I want to say Seattle gets back on track, but I can't believe that. I got Arizona winning this game. Fletch, who do you got?
Yes, sir. This should be a pretty good game. I do think that. Well, first and foremost, I'm a man of my word. I told you off air. I got to eat my words when I'm wrong. It's something I feel like I got to do. I feel like we see a lot of analysts on TV. They're just, they may see, or even on other podcasts, they just are extremely wrong sometimes. And a lot of people are afraid to admit it. That's not me, man. I'm straightforward. I'm, by the book on this one. I got to eat my words against Seattle. I thought they were going to come out Russ's first game. As much as I like Russ and I know he's a gamer, I'm like you. I just don't think he was ready. I expected him to be, if not, at least play well. So from last week, I do think that that game helped him. I do think that the extra week of this week of practice helped them as well. I don't. He's not going to get shut out 2 weeks in a row. First and foremost, I'm torn again. I'm torn again, and I've picked this game, and I'm just gonna stick with my pick. I'm gonna go with the Seahawks, man. I don't. I'm just gonna roll with it. It's a big game again. The Seahawks have to get back right. They're 3-6 right now, last in the NFC West. This win is desperately needed because 8 losses is just not gonna cut it this year, especially with the extra game. I don't think a 9-8 team can make the playoffs, and even if they lose this game. I mean, they'll be at 3-7. That means they would have to essentially run the table to get a playoff spot. I think they do win this game. And the reason being is really the injuries to the Cardinals with Hopkins and Kyler Murray being hurt. Even if they play, I'm just not expecting them to come out and be 100% and play that well. I think Seattle has had this whole week to prepare for them. It is a divisional matchup. They know what that team is capable of. They see them very often, especially with this style offense they've been playing over the last few years. I just think Seattle does what they need to do to at least be still in the conversation. I'm not saying the Cardinals are a bad team. I just think the injuries are going to catch up to them because not only are they missing those two guys, as much as James Conner has balled out this year, they are still missing Kenyon Drake as well. So I do have the Seahawks winning this game in a close one.
Okay. Very good pick. Our last pick for the pick six, we have the Steelers going on the road to face the LA Chargers. The Chargers coming off of a loss, where the Steelers coming off of a bye. Now, granted, we still may not see Ben Roethlisberger this week. That might be another start for Mason Rudolph, which I know everyone just I can feel the excitement in the air right now. Uh, but what this means is that you will see probably a lot more of Najee Harris going against a defense that likes to protect against the pass, but not so much against the run. That being said, I'm going to say Pittsburgh goes on the road with Najee Harris and company, gets it done barely. I don't see this being a high scoring game. I don't see this being a great game to watch, but I think Najee Harris gets enough out of that run game. The Steelers, they get the win. Fletch, who do you got?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good pick. I have the Steelers as well, winning this game. I'm just not trusting the Chargers right now. I think they got a. I mean, I think I want to say actually there's a new injury report out where Herbert's dealing with a little bit of an injury. I don't think it'll really hinder him a lot, but that Steeler defense is still pretty good, and I think they'll stifle that offense just a little bit, enough to win the game. I'm not big on either team right now. I think they're just both moving in the wrong direction. This is another game that has a lot of weight. We mentioned the Bengals being eighth and the Raiders being ninth facing off this week. Well, the reason why I think one of the whoever wins that game is going to slide up is essentially whoever loses this game between the Steelers and Chargers are going to slide out. Plain and simple. It's just simple math here. So, um, big game. I do have the Steelers winning this one. Close game, I believe as well. I would not be surprised one way or another, but I do think for the very same reasons you mentioned, Najee Harris going against that run defense that's really not that great. With the Chargers not really impressing anymore as they were a little bit earlier this season. So I do have the Steelers winning this one.
Very good pick, and we will see how well we do this past week. If you want to join in on the picking fun, simply put your picks in the comments below, either on Facebook or on many of our other platforms, podcast areas, and we will guide you to the list. Right now, it's a very close race amongst the top But we will see how these picks go this week. Let's go ahead, Fletch, and finish off this podcast with our NFL top 10. We've done it over and over again. At this point, there was a team I put up at number one last week that really laid an egg, so my top 10 is really going to be messed up. But what we're going to do is just a little bit differently this week. I'm going to name off my 10, 9, and 8 to start off because I
Okay.
think most of those, for the most part, haven't really changed. There is one newcomer to that. I'll talk about them here in a second. First off, I still have the Saints at number 10 from last week. Again, I don't really trust their quarterback scenario, but their defense is just that good. I really like them sitting at number 10 yet again, but they're on the cusp of potentially not being on the top 10 anymore. Depending on what happens with the offensive things, another team that's pushing to that number 10 spot would be the New England Patriots, sitting at 6-4. Mac Jones and company is actually only half a game back out of the division lead. Yes, the division lead at this point. So they are potentially there as well, but I like the Saints at number 10. At number 9, a newcomer that finally won 3 straight games is now leading the division in the AFC West, the Chiefs. Yes, the Chiefs are finally back in the fold. Patrick Mahomes reminded us that, yes, he's still Patrick Mahomes. Now, defensively, they're not great. Still, there's not really anything much to love there. It's kind of the opposite of what we see with New Orleans. But it's Patrick Mahomes. He's going to throw 5 touchdowns if he wants to throw 5 touchdowns. He's just going to stop throwing it to the other team. I like them at number 9. And then after a really disappointing loss last week, I have the Ravens sitting at number 8. We went into that game. I think that was the Monday night game, correct?
Thursday night game.
Thursday night game. Even worse. Went into the Thursday night game thinking the Ravens had this in the bag. My goodness, that game was ugly. And not only ugly, but the Dolphins took care of business. So I have them falling one spot from the 7th spot last week that I had them. Fletch, who is your 10, 9, and 8?
Let me just make sure I heard this right. You have Ravens, Pats, Chiefs, 8, 9, 10. Is that right? Oh no, I'm sorry. You had the Saints, right?
Saints, then the Chiefs, then the Ravens.
Okay. So we're very similar. I will say. At my number 10, I do have the Kansas City Chiefs as a new team on the list. They are starting to right the ship. As Travis Kelce said, they got their mojo back. They look good again. Defense still a little bit left to be desired, but I do have the Chiefs sliding back in there as the division leaders right now due to the rest of the AFC West not really wanting it anymore. Is really what I kind of chalk that up to. But nonetheless, the Kansas City Chiefs have been playing very good football. Pat Mahomes looks like Pat Mahomes as of late. I think they continue to roll, continue to collect a few wins. They have a big matchup that I wanted to put on the docket this week, but I'll be honest, I kind of got sick of the Cowboys and the Chiefs being on this list of pick sixes every week. So I decided to go with some tougher game or some other games that are tough as well. So nonetheless, I do have the Chiefs here at 10. They're starting to play good football, and I think the defense will at least catch up a little bit. It wasn't great necessarily to begin with. At the same time, it's been better in past years than it has been this year, and I think they'll at least get back to being an average defense. So I have them here at 10th. At ninth, I have the New England Patriots. I really like this Pats team. They were my number 10 team last week. I really like how well rounded they are. Mac Jones is right now the favorite to win Rookie of the Year as far as quarterbacks are concerned. The running game is there, regardless if it's Ramondre Stevenson or if it's Damian Harris. They can run the ball. They have a lot of very good receivers, and I'd say very good just because a lot of those guys, they are a little bit of journeymen. They've been on teams, but they've always been in the rotation of other teams, and now here they are collectively, playing very well as well. Then on the defensive side of the ball, they even though they got rid of Stephon Gilmore, they show why they didn't really need him with a couple good corners there as well. J.C. Jackson being one of them. And then overall, the defense is just playing very, very well as of late. So I have the Pats at ninth, and I am the same as you on my number 8 team. I have the Ravens here at number 8. Just again, that loss against the Dolphins is just really unacceptable. I just still think this is a very good team, which is the reason why I still have them 8th. With obviously, quite a bit of season left. Lamar Jackson is still, Lamar Jackson. I just think the Dolphins really had a very good game playing against them on a short week, and I think the Ravens were not expecting it. Thus the reason for that loss. So I got the Ravens at eighth, Pats ninth, Chiefs 10th. I left the Saints out, man, and it kind of I was torn between the Chiefs and the Saints. The biggest thing for me was just the losses that I saw that I checked out the schedule that the Saints have played. I mean, they have the loss against Carolina early this year. Have a loss against the Giants. They have another loss against the Falcons. It's just a lot of losses against average or sub-average teams. I get the offense is really not quite where it should be, especially now that Jameis is gone. Defense is still very good. I like the defense, but even over the last three games, they've given up 27, 27, and then 23 points. So I mean, the defense is still good, but at the same time, they have kind of shown they're vulnerable a little bit. So for that reason, I kind of slid them out. They would actually be the first team on the outside looking in for me.
Yeah, and again, they're very, very close. And again, I would probably, again, like I said, the Patriots very close at that almost number 10 spot for me. Things could change this week, obviously, depending on how the games go. The next one I'm going to do the 7, 6, and 5 teams. And the reason I'm doing these three in a row is because all three of these teams at one point disappointed us. They went into a game they should have
Yes.
won, and they just, awful. But you still have to rank them. You still have to give them some type of ranking. Now, last week I had the Bills at number 5. I've dropped them to number 7. And yes, before you go crazy, they did beat the Jets, but it was the Jets. I mean, and they lost the previous game to the Jaguars. Uh,
Hmm.
it's a struggle. I mean, they can be a really good team. They're right there. I mean, my difference really for me, the difference between my number 7 team and even my number 1 team is just so marginal. Any one of these teams could be ebb and flow. There hasn't really been a team that's just taken off at this point and just really taken control of everything. A team that did, and then they faltered back, and then you have other teams jump up and catch them. So I have the Bills at number 7 for now. At number 6, I have the Buccaneers, which was my number 1 this past week. Uh, you lose to the Washington football team. That's 3 and 6, a team that's completely out of their own division. They have no chance, and you lose to them. Awful. No, you get punished. You go back to number 6. Again, still a very good team. They can do a lot of really good things. Obviously, they're reigning champion, but you can't have these type of games and expect good things to be had by us analysts. So yes, you're going to fall to number 6. At number 5, this is where I have the Cowboys. They moved up a spot. They throttled the Falcons. We kind of mentioned that earlier in this podcast. Now, granted, they did lose to the Broncos just the week prior, but like I said, these are three teams that at some point have disappointed us. And right now, I like what the Cowboys are doing defensively. They are creating turnovers and creating points off turnovers. They are doing some really good things. Travion Diggs could be in line for Defensive Player of the Year. He is just catching everything coming his way. They are looking really, really good. But currently, I actually have them at number 5. Bucks was number 6. I have the Cowboys eking back into the top 5. Fletch, who do you have at number 7, 6, and your 5?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would agree with you about 1 through 7, and I would actually throw the eighth team being the Ravens in that mix of 1 through 8, really being very competitive. But as far as 5, 6, and 7, we do differ a little bit, but there are a couple teams that we have in common. Actually, at number 7, I have the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Okay.
Little bit low, I think, for most people's taste, but I mean, I know you have them one spot above me here. Last week, I did have them fifth. I have them sliding down just again due to that loss. Just I mean, and then recently, just I mean, I know they've lost to was it Washington? They lost to New Orleans. They've lost two straight with a bye week between the two games. So I'm just not really sold on them currently. I obviously not really too threatened by how they may finish the season, though, either. We know that's a capable football team over there. They are dealing with a few injuries as well, especially at the wide receiver spot with Godwin dealing with a few injury. We're dealing with an injury as well as Antonio Brown. So none, and then Robert Gronkowski as well. So I mean, they're dealing with some injuries that might be part of the reason why they're struggling a little bit. But I do have them sliding down to seventh. I have the Rams at 6, and that was kind of tough for me. Biggest thing is that while They both have 3 losses. The Rams haven't had a bye week yet, so they are 7-3. They've also lost 2 straight again, which is why I kind of have them reeling a little bit outside of my top five. Have them there at 6. The only thing holding them above the Bucks is the head-to-head win. And I'm going to leave it there for now. I don't mind these teams flip flopped right now as well. It's just me valuing the head-to-head, even though it was about a month or two, about a little bit over a month ago at this point. Um, so I have them here at 6, and then creeping into my top five here as we start to really shape that out. I do have the Bills. I had them sink down to 8th last week, just with a lot of moving around, and again the Rams and the Bucks losing get against teams they really shouldn't have lost to. I just have the Bucks jumping those teams as well as the Ravens losing too. I have them jumping all 3 of those teams just due to the fact that they won. They did what they were supposed to do. Again, probably should have lost to Jacksonville a couple weeks ago, but at the same time, again, we talked about it. That's still a damn good football team across the board. Very good from the offense to the defense and what they can do with the run and the pass in both categories. So I do have the Bills here rounding out that 5, 6, 7 range there at number 5.
Very nice. And I will have you continue on. Tell us your top four teams for this week.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So again, it's again 1 through 7 or 1 through 8 is just difficult, but nonetheless, there are some teams that I just feel like are still at the top. I'll start with number 4 being the Arizona Cardinals. I understand they're dealing with some injuries. They're 8-2, which is tied for the best record in football right now. I really still like this team. They're doing very well. I think once they get all their guys back healthy, they'll continue to pick up where they left off. The defense is very good. They're still 3-0 in the division, which is something that they'll hold over the rest of that division, which is very nice for them. Again, just a loss last week and dealing with some injuries. I do have them here at 4 when last week they were my number one team. Just that's what a loss can do to you with the way the season's been going this year. At number 3, I have the Dallas Cowboys. I think again that Denver loss was a blip on the radar. I just felt like the receivers, both Cooper and Lamb, were dealing with some injuries that week, and then they just I think Denver was just up for that game and just put it to them straight out the gate, and they couldn't really do much offensively to combat that. So I think again it was just a blip on the radar, and it kind of showed they played against a surging Atlanta team at the time, and they decimated them. So that was a huge win. Kind of like how we talk about the college football playoff and the rankings for that. It was like a style. It was a lot of style points there in that win. So I think they really flexed their muscles. So I do have them creeping up to number 3. My top 2 teams, we'll go with number 2 here first, is going to be the Green Bay Packers. 8-2. They shut out Seattle. I know it was Russ Wilson's first game back. Man, like you said, probably came back too soon, or possibly came back too soon, or maybe they were just rusty. It's hard to say. I know the team's dealing with a couple injuries with Chris Carson not playing over the last month or so, but at the same time, for them to shut out Seattle, something that's never been done before. They're also tied for the best record in football right now. I just got to go with the Packers here at number 2, especially with the win over the Cardinals to kind of help their resume a little bit. And my number 1 team is the Tennessee Titans. I love the Titans and how they've been playing lately. They started the season a little bit slow, which a lot of people were shocked about. But they've won 6 in a row, and they really just don't show many signs of slowing down here. They had a tough game against a very good defense with the Saints, who I know is still in your top 10, and just on the outside looking out for me. We both think highly of that defense. And, they did what they were supposed to do with A.J. Brown not even having a great game and no Derrick Henry. That just shows me how good the team is as a whole. Possibly the best team in the AFC, and they're 8-2, whereas no team has more than 6 wins in that whole conference. So, yeah, I have the Titans here sitting as the kings of the NFL currently as of week 11 that we're heading into right now.
Correct.
So yeah, I really like them, and they have a extremely favorable matchup at home against Houston. So expect them to put win number 9 up on the board this week.
Yeah, I would solely believe that they should be able to get that win. But we said the same thing with the Bills against the Jags and the Cowboys against the Broncos. So Who knows what's going to happen, but we'll definitely keep in touch when it comes to definitely for fantasy football purposes. But as for my top four, at number four, I have the Cardinals sitting there. They were my number two team last week. Again, the problem is staying healthy with Murray and Hopkins out. They're still playing great football. I think the defense is very, very good, but they're just one spot at or a couple spots behind from my last rankings this past week. It'll be a little of a surprise because I have the Rams just side or just one spot ahead of them. I know the Rams are a little bit of a downturn, but it is still your Super Bowl pick, and I still believe in your Super Bowl pick. And I know that they're very, very good. They just gotta get things back into order, and I know that they can dominate just with the best of teams. So I have them at number three. I have your number one at my number two. I have the Titans at number two. They've been super impressive without Derrick Henry. They've got a lot of great wins on their resume. They beat the Bills, they beat the Colts, they beat the Rams, they beat the Saints just here recently, along with a win earlier in the year against the Seahawks. I like them sitting at number two. Very impressive that they're doing this without their king at this point. They will continue to move forward. Hopefully, they can get Julio Jones back healthy and maybe get that passing game going a little bit more. But they are playing some very good football at this point. I like them at number two. And then my number one, I have Aaron Rodgers and the Packers sitting there. And again, like we've mentioned over and over at this point, all these teams, 1 through 7, 1 through 8, whatever you want to say, just paper thin differences between any one of these teams. I like the Packers at this point. Aaron Rodgers, when he is fully ready to go, him and Devontae Adams put together some heck of a combination. And just like you mentioned earlier, it's really their defense is what's making the things go at this point in Green Bay. One of the best secondaries to play. So when they go against more of a passing team like the Rams or maybe even the Chiefs, they are going to play well against them as long as that secondary stays healthy. So those are our top 10 for this week, and we will be keeping our eye on the games this past or this upcoming weekend, along with all the other sports out there for both college and professional. Fletch, anything else before we check out for the day?
One more thing. We'll stick with well, actually two more things. I want to kind of mention something that we talked about earlier in the show. However, I really like the at this point in the season. We talked about it. We're more than halfway through the year. A lot of teams have gone through their bye week, I should say. The playoff race is really shaping up, Clark. Just kind of want to mention this really quick. Right now, your division champs would be the Titans, the Bills, the Ravens, and the Chiefs in that order. In the AFC, seeds 1 through 4, with the Titans getting the first round bye. And as of now, the wild card teams in the AFC are the Steelers, the Pats, and the Chargers, with the Bengals and the Raiders, Colts, Browns knocking on the door. Broncos, you can throw them in the mix at 5-5, tied with the Colts and the Browns right now. But I think it's really going to come down to for the wild card spot, a couple teams that are surging right now, like the Pats, teams that possibly like the Colts. Other teams that look good, like the Bengals and the Raiders at times. Those are your 10, the Chargers too. Those are your teams that I really think will be there come the end of the season. I'm not sold on the Steelers quite yet, just with offensive woes they've been having. With Ben being hurt, also when he plays, I mean, you know, he's up there in age. Might be his last season. We're seeing that a lot. And then on the NFC side of things, the division winners right now will be the Packers, Cards, Cowboys, and Bucks, 1 through 4, with the Packers getting the first round bye over in the NFC currently, who is your number one team. Titans being my number one team, both 1 and 2 on our list, both 1 and 2 in the league right now. So we both agree that those are probably the two current best teams in football. And then rounding out the wild card right now is the Rams, Saints, Pats, or Panthers. I'm sorry, at 5, 6, and 7. What I will say is this: what I'm very, very, very interested in is how 6, 7, 8 shakes out for the NFC. Really, due to the fact that the Saints have a very good defense, the Panthers have a very good defense, the Vikings have a very good offense. These are the teams that are really knocking on the door between 6, 7, 8. You would assume the Rams and the Cards will decide the division and also the top wild card spot. But so 6 and 7 seem to be a log jam to try to get into the playoffs. So pay attention to these races. There's a lot of huge matchups on the schedule coming up over the next few weeks. With the added game, most teams have 7 games left. Some have 8 games left. So we'll see how this kind of shakes out. But just this time of year, Clark, is I think it's good to mention kind of where we are and And I want to ask you this question: what team on the outside looking in right now, or even a wild card team that you have as a dark horse? Not so much just to not so much just to win it all or anything like that. And we're going to exclude the Rams from this because we know they're fighting for the division. But who do you foresee possibly in NFC or AFC that's fighting for a wild card position or in a wild card position right now? That you kind of see as a playoff dark horse, meaning they could win, wild card and divisional weekend, or at least wild card weekend, and make a lot of noise in the next round. Well, how are you feeling? Who are you liking so far?
I think the one team that comes to mind that really has been playing great defense, they're getting enough out of their offense. They've been very efficient on that side of the football. Nothing flashy, but that's what you typically see in a Bill Belichick team. Yes, it is the Patriots of all teams that could potentially push for a uh, really could push for the division at this point. Not just a wild card spot, but could potentially win the
Yeah.
division of how well they've been playing with Mac Jones being clearly the best rookie quarterback in the draft. He's been playing just very efficient football. Nothing flashy, but you don't need it to be flashy. They are actually 4-0 on the road at this point. Got to get a little bit better playing at home, but four straight wins. Their defense is really, really good, even without Stephon Gilmore. Uh, they're doing what they need to, and I think Bill Belichick might be in the race for Coach of the Year at this point. Maybe right behind, maybe like a Mike Vrabel type coach that's really doing great without his lead running back at this point. Um, or even Cliff Kingsbury out of Arizona. But I'm going to keep an eye on those Patriots at this point because not only could they win a wild card spot, they could potentially win the division. Uh, uh,
Hmm.
Sans Tom Brady, which means Bill Belichick's continuing to try and put his name as the greatest coach of all time debate. So I like where things are, but like you mentioned, there's still quite a bit of football yet to be played. A lot of teams just kind of muddled in right now. No one's really taking the initiative to really take a huge step moving forward, but I think over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we are going to see a couple of different teams really take off, hopefully, but you never know. As of right now, really the only team that's really taken off at this point either be the Packers in the NFC North or the Cowboys in the NFC East, both handily handling their divisions at this point. Every other division we gotta have to wait and see what happens. Uh, Fletch, another phenomenal show. Again, that free time trying to get soaked up by all those wonderful games to play and other games to watch. As of right now, I just checked the score of Ohio State Xavier. I think Ohio State was down by 5. Last time I checked, they're actually down by 8 with 4 minutes left. We're going to check that game out. But for right now, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Harry Hobo. That's Fletch, and we're out.
Peace.